Good morning, everyone. Happy Monday. Welcome to Catalyst Energies. My name is Dee. Thank you for joining me. I'm so grateful that you're here. This is the Daily Medicine Transmission for Monday, September 27th, 2021. Mercury stations retrograde. Today, we have some things to talk about, of course. It's been quite a week. So welcome back, everyone. If you're new to the channel, welcome here. Thank you for being here. I truly appreciate each and every one of you. I got the Palo Santo going, inviting in all of the good stuff right now. So it's been one heck of a week, and I really, really, really appreciate all the people that have reached out personally. It's been a lot going on for all of us, I know, and I do have to take care of myself. So I'm on the mend from being sick. I have my tonic that I've been taking, and that actually made a huge difference in a very small amount of time. The tonic water and juice, right? Fresh squeeze, fresh juiced, fresh pressed juice of mandarins and clementines. That made a big difference. So, and also my essential oils, of course, and just plenty of rest and Reiki and supporting my own immunity, because we are already built to heal ourselves. Isn't it so wonderful and just a blessing? So happy Monday. Boy, oh boy, what can I say? If you thought that things were gonna go as planned, didn't I say? Didn't I say in the astrology report for this weekend? And I want to go back and actually look at some of the astrology over the weekend really quick when we get to it, just to show how strong of presence there was in terms of really wanting to protect, really wanting to step out and advocate for ourselves, and also how much that was anchored by some manner of preformed archetype of where we're going and what that means. But I mean, if you really thought that the audit was going to go, that it was going to be this earth-shattering thing, and it was, right? I mean, if you watched the actual report, you saw, you saw, especially Dr. Shiva's report. I mean, geez, that in itself, as far as I'm concerned, was plenty to cast a lot of doubt on to the results, right? But Mercury retrograde, right? If you really thought that we were going to just move forward that quickly with a Mercury going retrograde in Libra, going back to the very same degree Mercury was at the time of this new moon, the cycle that we're still currently in, right? Because we're still in that new moon cycle, that new moon in Virgo, right? So I hope you're enacting some measure of patience and still leaving yourself open to receive something, to receive and to be listening and be patient, to receive that which you have been part of weaving together in this larger mosaic that we're all part of. So, but Mercury retrograde, that should have been obvious that we were going to come out of Mercury we're going to come out of that weekend of this these results being offered to us right into retrograde Mercury at Arcturus. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about what it means to be adept, what this Libra energy really, really means, because we haven't even gotten to October yet. And so right after this, I'm going to take a break, eat some food, and then I'm going to record the astrology report for the season from equinox to solstice, because October is soon upon us and it is all systems go in October. And it's so important that we really understand and embody the Libra energy and what that really means. And Mercury stationing retrograde at Arcturus is such a beautiful and timely event, right? To go over this information for ourselves, going back to the degree Mercury was at the time of the new moon, revisiting that degree, and then moving forward again. There's a lot of information that we really do need to go over, and Mercury retrograde is our review time. It's time to go over things. It's time to read our study guide, right? To go over our notes, to really go back over all of the information that we have gathered and everything we've applied so far, and see how it feels when we apply it internally. right? Because it's going to be so important. I cannot overstate how important this Libra energy and this new moon in October is really going to be in terms of being able to be the hub in this wheel that's going to be turning faster and faster. So one thing I will say, and there's a couple things, we're going to look at some sciencey stuff. We're going to look at some events that have happened in the last 24 hours, and we're going to make some very direct connections to a mythological context that is directly connected to Arcturus and Mercury. Oh my gosh, that's so interesting. I do feel like that we've reached some sort of critical mass. And when I say I feel like that, I get my own input from my own process, my own intuition, and I invite you, I urge you to cultivate that discernment and intuition for yourself. That is a very Virgo type of thing. Remember, we are still in a Virgo lunar cycle, just because we're moving into Libra with all of this energy now, especially with Mars. We have the Sun, we have Mercury in Libra, retrograde now. There's a lot of Libra, of course, and this is important. And those are all personal planets. Venus in Scorpio, really paving the way to really hold the space for the Scorpio signature and frequency come November, because of course, because October and November, the Sun moves into Scorpio. Mars is going to move into Scorpio. Eventually, Mercury will move into Scorpio, and the nodes will eventually shift from into Taurus, Scorpio, which means our lunar eclipse in November is Pleiadian. Pleiadian. We're going to talk about that too. We will definitely talk about that in the astrology report for the season. The Pleiadian revival is on its way, and we are now leaving the territory of the Hyades, right? We've had plenty of opportunity now to let things move through us in terms of our expression, what we are consciously coming to realize and letting it move through us. And we're still in that place, kind of. Black Moon Lilith is now retrograde, and she's in Gemini, and so she's moving in her retrograde fashion. So there's that part of us, that deep part of us, that's going to go back into that territory as well. So we will revisit it, right? But even asteroid Ceres has moved out of the Hyades territory. And when the nodes shift into Taurus and Scorpio, it's going to be a lot of feeling. And we have to get very comfortable with that. And part of that is learning how to apply what we've learned about ourselves, Virgo, into the social context, Libra, in order to stay balanced. It's going to be so important. So there does appear, at least in my own discernment and intuition and analysis, that we have reached some sort of critical mass, right? In terms of people's awakening process. They've reached a point now where it doesn't feel anymore like it's just a small handful of people really fighting all the zombies, right? And I use that term loosely. Please do not think that I'm associating that term with any specific group of people, because I'm not. It's really just to illustrate the idea here that there has been a critical mass of people waking up to what this is, and now there are more people. Now, when that happens, the other side, right? Of course, we still have that Gemini aspect in the nodal axis here, don't we? And Ceres, asteroid Ceres, is in Gemini, right? The goddess of the grain, the agriculture. Keep that in mind. Put a pin in that concept, because it's going to be important when we talk about Arcturus here in a little bit. The other side, right? Which is really just the other side of the very same singular consciousness of the universe. But we experience it in this 3D realm as polarity, because it is polarity that gives us choice, does it not? Right? Free will and choice can only come from polarity, right? That we have something to choose. When this critical mass, you can tell that it's speeding up. The Schumann spiked yesterday to the highest it's been in a long time, 80 hertz. And we'll look at that. We're going to look at, I wish I could have shown you the magnetosphere graph from yesterday, because they certainly bring it up in real time. But we will look at we can look at also the speed of the solar wind, the density of it, because that is now increasing now that there was this big buffer with the Schumann. So it does feel like there's been a critical mass reached. And remember, the Schumann is nothing more than a reflection of the frequency of the electromagnetic field. And so when the Earth's heart rate increases, then the field gets more higher frequency, right? More wavelengths per second. That's all that means, right? And so higher energy per time period. What are the instances where your heart rate goes up? Well, distress is definitely one of them, but also excitement and arousal, right? Those are also things that get your blood pumping, your heart rate pumping, right? Have you ever been super excited about a concept, or, you know, you're really kind of like in the flow of like some sort of activity, either creative, you know, even in the mental sphere as you're researching or you're creating something, and you reach that moment of like awareness, and it's like, it's, you know, all the blood starts rushing to your head and your whole body gets flush, you know. That's also can be that excitement and arousal, and the passion is also a reflection of the heart rate going up as well, right? Because your heartbeat starts going faster. That means it's pumping blood faster through your body. It's getting through all your blood vessels quicker. Your lymph is moving, all of these things, right? All of the systems. And of course, when your immune system is activated, it also is happening because your internal thermostat is kicked up, sending blood and lymph around your body even faster. So of course, that's been on my mind because I've been sick, but with the Schumann spiking yesterday, like that, it felt less about distress and more about there was a convergence in some way. We've reached some sort of critical mass, and that air trine between, and I talked about this in the astrology for the week, the air trine yesterday with Saturn, Mars, the Sun, and the fact that it was reinforced at the base between, or the moon, sorry, and then the Sun and Rahu, the North Node. I'll show this all to you on the chart so you have some sort of like visual representation. It really locked a lot of things into place, and provided a really, really strong anchor in terms of our mental capacity on all levels, right? An air trine, a grand air trine is all three air signs connected through each, you know, planetary body or some sort of celestial body. So we'll look at that because it really locked some things into place, especially with the moon in Gemini. So we have the moon in Gemini moving into Cancer by tomorrow, which is her home territory. And we'll have our third quarter square. But there does appear to have been some sort of convergence, right? Regardless of the fact that it's pretty clear that they're going to put up as many roadblocks as possible to actually decertifying the election results from Maricopa County, despite the evidence, and despite the fact that the evidence has already existed for, you know, well before the election, and it was consistently squashed for a number of reasons, right? Controlling of the narrative, controlled opposition, right? We trying to control for chaos when they know that they can't, right? Despite those obvious roadblocks, what we're finding is that just the experience of this happening and what did come out and all of the conversations, all of the pushback, all of the energy that is now building is in fact that tipping point, that critical mass feature. And there has been a convergence with the planet herself. And this is really important to recognize because this is, that connection is what's going to bring us through. We really need to start, we're going to be moving out of the mind and the higher mind of Gemini and Sag and our nodal axis into Taurus and Scorpio, which is very much about feeling in the body and in the power of our symbols, the power of our emotions, the depth of our feeling. So it's important to be able to apply everything that we've learned about ourselves in this Libra time because it is going to allow us to be balanced so that we can actually feel into things and know how to move forward. Because as a result of this convergence, right, and reaching this critical mass, as awesome as it is, they are going to up the ante. And that's pretty obvious. And in some ways, they have contracted the timeline so it moves faster, right? They're moving up things, right? And so, of course, the aspects of the astrology aren't going to change because those are huge cycles that have nothing to do with what we on this planet can have an impact on necessarily. Those are large cosmic cycles. So they are still fixed points in time. But what happens in the interim, right, in the space in between those, is being contracted so that it gets funneled into a much smaller and more dense space. And so you can feel that. You can feel the speeding and the contraction of time that is causing it to seem like it's moving faster. And it is, right? Everything's getting moved up now. So be aware of that, because now it's really going to matter. And when we, like I said, when we come into the new moon, it's the same day that Pluto stations direct. And I'm going to get into the astrology of this later today. It's Monday. We just came off this weekend. We just came off the weekend of the audit. A lot has happened over the weekend, and I just want to speak to all of it. So first thing I want to do is let's look at the science, right? Let's look at the things that have been happening and know that these are inseparable from us now. And they've always been inseparable, but paying attention to them is really going to be important, because that's part of the Taurus archetype, is being connected to what is, right? The so-called objective world around us, the medium, the earth, right? The soil itself, and the resonance of the planet. Taurus corresponds to the throat chakra. Throat chakra corresponds to the Schumann. Schumann is the electromagnetic, it is the resonance of the field around the planet based on her own heartbeat, what she puts off, and the planet as a toroidal field. So these are all important connections. And remember, the throat chakra, their voice resonance, that is where we have control over actual resonances, up and out, in our singing, in our chanting. And a big part of the Lion's Gate originally was the fact that it was our voices, it was our resonance that we are expressing from the seat of our creative power, which is at our base here in the sacral area, coming up and out. And it really screwed up the matrix. It did. The agent Smiths were scrambling on that one. And so when we have this new moon cycle, which is return of that gate, opening back up for us to receive it, right? This kind of like this reverberation that's coming back around, we still have to be patient to a certain extent. And by the time we get to the end of this cycle, I think it'll be pretty clear to us as that reverberation comes back around, right? Because everything is cyclical. All right, so let's look at the science. And I'm going to check in with the chat real quick. Okay. All right. Let's... And then we'll get into the reading for today to see what to, where we're at, what to expect. All right, here we go. So I want to make sure we're exactly where we need to be. Okay. First things first here. All right, my friends. So first things first, let's look at the Schumann from yesterday, right? Everybody's talking about it. It's always, everybody's got their perception, their whatever about the Schumann. It is like, you're not on the front end of these things anymore if you're not talking about it. So as we see here, we're going to see that, sorry guys. So here is 80 hertz right here, so it really peaked, and when it's and you can see here, this is where we're at. This is where we're at now, which is right here. It's down to a blip, and and you see, I want you to pay attention to this. You can see how there's a blackout right at this point, and this is important. I'm going to show you why it's important here in a second. So here's the Schumann peaking at 80 hertz yesterday, the 26th. And like I said, this was a convergence point, right, of humanity finally reaching this critical mass of awareness that really got the Earth engaged. Now, that doesn't mean that... sometimes it feels different, and I've talked about this before. Sometimes it is distress, and you can see that happening. Now, one thing I will say here is that it was around this time that we were receiving a lot of the solar wind from that coronal hole stream. But if you were to look at the graph, and I'll post the graph on my social media today, so if you're not hooked up on social media, Telegram especially, then you can go and link to that from the description box in this video, and then you can see, I'm going to show you and if you're following Suspicious Observers, or you go to spaceweathernews.org, then you can see those graphs too. But what you're going to see is that around this time, especially with the magnetosphere, if you were looking at that graph in real time, you would see the density of the field around the planet as it's getting bombarded with the solar wind. And so it's like the planet came in and like really buffered a lot of that for us. And you can see how right after this, like the solar wind like dropped off in speed and intensity pretty dramatically. Now today it's amping, the speed is still going down, and there's still CME that could very well reach us. And one thing that I did also see is that the density of the solar wind and the potential for geomagnetic disturbances definitely went up today as well. And you can see that there's no real response to that on this end here as those things were coming into the planet. But this was very correlated with the time frame, if you watch the magnetosphere, where there was no pressure in the magnetosphere. And the density was very much on the outside as the density of the solar wind was coming in, and there was just a huge buffer. So I feel like that this is very, like I said, there was a convergence. And when we look at the astrology and that Earth trine that happened yesterday, there was also, I think, a strong buffer that is directly related to this. This is just my opinion. There's really no way to determine any of this other than observations of different data points. But you can't make this, people like to say this is what's happening, when in reality, there's actually no evidence yet to suggest that is or isn't happening. All we can do, and all I'm going to do, is give you data points, and you have to now analyze them yourself and come to your own conclusion based on your gut, right? And your own intuition. And as soon as people are telling you something is happening when there's absolutely no way for you to verify that for yourself, that should be suspicious to you, right? And even readings, intuitive readings, astrological readings, you have to, and as a person who does this for a living, you do have to take that through your own intuitive discernment filter to decide whether or not you identify that as truth. And sometimes, we have to learn the hard way when we've been programmed and deceived and manipulated based on what AI has learned about us. So it takes time, and it takes a commitment, and that's come out in plenty of readings. So, but what I'm going to say here is that there has been some kind of convergence. We've reached a critical mass, and things are going to speed up now. Now we kind of, in terms of the astrology, that's been obvious for a long time, that this time frame was going to be kind of like a flashpoint. Like that is not a surprise based on the astrological configurations. It's whether or not we actually got to the point of this convergence in this way that was going to make a difference about how we experience the unfolding of this process. And that's not new to any of us. If you're here on this channel and you're engaged in this process with us along the way, then you know that. And it's really about the choices you make in each moment that determine how you experience the unfolding of these huge cosmic cycles, right? Nothing can stop what's coming, right? Nothing can stop it. It's already over. It's already unfolding. It's in the process of dissolving and growing at the very same time. And our job is to choose the truth every single moment. That's what real freedom means, because freedom will come from choosing the truth in every single moment. And there's a lot of ways that we dissociate because the truth is not the same as goodness, right? The truth is not comfortable. The truth is usually blinding in a lot of ways. And so we have to be aware of that as well. So that's the Schumann yesterday. It's, you're going to see it all over social media, and everybody's going to have their idea of what this means. But what I will say is that I do believe that this was a convergence point, and that we've reached some sort of critical mass, and there's been an interaction between us and the planet, and that buffer from the solar wind was pretty spot on in terms of timing with this spike in the Schumann resonance. So now I want to show you, and I promise all these things are connected. It's kind of nuts how much it is. Now let's look at this right here. You see that there is this blank spot, and this is about between 5 and 6 a.m. UTC. So we're going to look here. Now there was a big earthquake here in Greece today on the island of Crete. Make sure you guys can see, right? Here's the island of Crete. And if we go here, we are looking, here's Greece, right? Here's Athens and Greece. And so there was a large earthquake, and like I said, 6.0, only 7 kilometers down. That is not very deep at all. So that it had a huge impact. And I'm sure things are going to start coming, it's in the news. And as of a couple hours ago, one person was reported dead, and there's been several injuries, lots of big, lots of damage, right? 6.0 in a populated area on an island is no joke. And so Mediterranean Sea, this is something that's come up in certain circles. So if you're here as a result of, some of you know what I'm talking about in terms of underwater volcanoes and the volatility of them. So that's something to keep in mind. Now let's look at the time frame again. I want to show you something. So we see here that it's between 6 and 7 a.m. UTC that there was this massive 6-point earthquake on the island of Crete. Where was the blackout? Oh, that's so interesting that it was right here, like right between 5 and 6 a.m. UTC. The Schumann resonance was just for that blip, just totally blacked out from measuring anything, right? And then it's just still flatlined. So it could be nothing. Right? It could certainly be nothing, right? It's pretty flatlined, even though there was a huge earthquake in that area at the same time. But this is just blacked out. That's interesting. So just facts, right? Data points. I'm not going to draw any conclusions for you. I'm just going to show you what is. And then you draw those conclusions based on your own discernment and intuition and checking your gut, right? Because I don't know. I have some suspicions, and I'm sure that we can have an incredible dialogue about it over on Telegram, why this is blacked out, but I'm here to just give you data points about it. So that was pretty big. That was a big earthquake. Now there was another one, also in Greece on the island of Crete, just a couple hours after that. So probably some measure of aftershock, maybe. I mean, it's in a different part of the island, which I think is interesting. Not nearly as strong, but also not as deep either, like only 5 kilometers underground. The earth is literally shaking in this area where there is a huge underwater volcano. That's so interesting. So what time did this happen? This happened between 11 and 12 UTC. Let's look at the Schumann. It kind of blipped a tiny bit around, here's 11 to 12. So it just happened. Just kind of blipped right there. So we'll see if there's any blank spot for that as well. But there you go, guys. There you go. So we're going to empty these things, and I want to see if there's one more thing that I want to address here on the end of just the data points right now. There was something else that I did want to bring. Oh, let's look at the magnetosphere for this time frame. I think that might be important to look at. Let me see. So that's the velocity of the magnetosphere. So here we are in a density of the magnetosphere. And you can just go to these and check this, and it's in real time. So not much going on, a little bit of density right around here. but you don't see any incoming anything coming in to hit the field. Now there's a, whoa, that's interesting. Swirling around here. And if we go down to pressure, the pressure has definitely increased. Now, if you saw this at the time that the Schumann was spiking, it was all light colored. There was no red, there was no orange, there was no yellow. It was all good. The pressure was very, very minimal, despite the fact that we were in this coronal hole stream. Oh, look at that. That's fascinating. This is real time right now, roughly. So yeah, the pressure's increased, the density's increased, and there was an earthquake. So anyway, that's what I want to share about those things right now. And so we'll get into the chart. So like I said, data points. They're just data points. You have to draw your own conclusions and put it through your own filter about what's going on based on your own experiences. And that's the thing. We're all going to have our own perceptions, our own experiences that are responsible for shaping that. But as we're going to see in today's reading, actually, as we embark on that we are being primed to go into that subconscious realm, which requires to be silent, to be listening, to be still to a certain extent, and to get into the inner source of our intuitive knowledge. So let's look at the reading for today. And we're going to start here with, our Emperor. So this is our causal factor coming into the moment. So the Emperor is the number 4, right? So you can see structure and form with the way that, the Emperor has his legs crossed. Here's the Lamb. That is a very Aries. I know that it's supposed to be the Ram because here's the Ram up here, but it's also the Lamb, right? It's the transition from Pisces into Aries because it's all new, right? It's new birth, it's new growth, it's the beginning of the spring here in the Northern Hemisphere. In the Southern Hemisphere, when the sun comes into Aries, it's definitely it's coming into Libra time and their harvest. But there's a change over here and something fresh and new, and it's carrying this flag. That's very fascinating. You have the phoenix on the shield here, holding this globe. It's got a staff. It's got the crown, and is surrounded by the ram, the Aries. So this is the Emperor, right? This is about responsibility, order, security, structure, physical reality, the seed point. It represents a time of stability and structure and a sense of law and order, right? And so what comes from that is creation, realism, recognition, responsiveness, right? Being tapped into the reality of what's around us, and all of the potential that can come forward from it. What's interesting to me is in the tarot, and in the tarot, the Empress comes first, right? It's the Magician, the High Priestess, as we see here is our outcome. The Magician and High Priestess. Remember, Magician, Mercury representing that magus, or us as the Magi, plural, or the Magus as singular. Mercury representing that aspect, as well as the Virgo aspect, which is being of service and devotion and discipline. But the Magician aspect of Mercury retrograde, right? And then the High Priestess, number 2, that is in fact the moon, the actual Cancerian element, right? The Mercury in Gemini specifically representing the Gemini element, right? And so you have Osiris and Isis, right? The Orion and Sirius aspect that I've talked about in other presentations. So, but what we have here is this construct of law and order and order, specifically order. And it's so interesting that it's Aries, because Aries is cardinal fire. Aries is the divine masculine. It's the seed point, but there's something about it because it's contained. The seed is contained within itself. And so that in itself is what provides the order and the structure. There is a boundary here of that holds all of the potential of what we could be, but it is very ordered and structured through natural law. And so there is a sense of stability and structure that has been our causal factor. And we'll see again with the grand air trine that was yesterday, that really did like anchor some things into place in a way that is very connected to this, because Mars was involved and Saturn was involved, and both of those things are either, Mars rules Aries, right? And so it's the masculine of taking charge and leading and being subjectively contained within itself, right? All of the potential of what it could be is contained within the seed. Saturn being the form and structure and crystallization of stability and security, right? So that was involved in that air trine as well. And so there is a really strong sense of where we're coming from, is this like, okay, this is what is, right? You can't, and there's a realism here, a recognition of truth that comes along with the Emperor too. It's not holding space so much as taking up the space, right? Being in the space, saying this is what is, right? Order and security and structure and responsibilism of the situation, right? And this is very powerful, and there's only growth that can happen from this point. So this is where I think what the real underlying power of the results of that situation. Not so much that it represents the end, but it represents the beginning, right? And this is what the Emperor also represents to an extent, the beginning of the unfolding of natural law from this very distinct point of the seed, right? And it's very structured and ordered. So you see the phoenix here, the double phoenix. You see the lamb. So there's a sense of newness and birth and innocence, but you also see structure and authority as well. So that's our causal factor leading here to this present moment here of just playfulness, right? The Princess of Wands is the Venus in the fire sign. So, passion, joy for life, right? Enthusiasm, courage, and beauty. I do feel like many of us are holding this in the sense that we now see what is, and we are prepared to dance in the flame, right? To dance in our creative transformative power, which is, and the spark of ourselves, the spark of our soul is fire. And so she's dancing, right? She's got a sun on her wand. She is, she's nude, right? So there is this really raw, authentic nature. She appears to be riding this flame. She also has this really large antennae, right? That says a lot to me in terms of the Venus nature, being sensitive to the world around, like being able to pick up on what's going on. Now, that does give her this groundedness of Earth, being that it is very Venusian. And she also has this large tiger that's kind of wrapped around her as well, that is inseparable from her, but is also kind of in this like really passive role, right? Just kind of going along for the ride and is inseparable. And so there's this idea and this concept that's going to come out in the astrology when we get to it, about the adeptness that is necessary, that goes along with Arcturus, what Arcturus really represents, of being able to seamlessly move and transfigure oneself back and forth within these two, from these two polarities as a real mastery. And so, but there certainly is something, there is an innocence and almost an immaturity that goes along with the princess of all of the suits, or all of the elements, right? Suits or elements. So she is very enthusiastic and courageous and beautiful, and she has passion, right? And she's willing to just like go along, ride the wave of the flame, right? And really embody that creative potential. Now, it is upright, so it is, not inverted, but there's always the possibility that, there's no water and there's no air involved in this card. And so when we embody this energy, we have to keep in mind that it could be very easy to just kind of burn down the object of our desire if we are not careful. But I also feel like that the playfulness and the joy in life that's you see in the rest of this reading is really what's spelled out here. And I think that at the heart of us, this is really where we want to be. We want to be sensitive to the world around us. We want to be able to ride the flame, so to speak, to be playful, to be authentic, to be courageous and passionate, and be joyful in our life, right? Now that we've seen some distinct set of like parameters here that is like, this is what it is, and now we know, and now we can kind of release that to a certain extent and be sensitive and be more of the feminine aspect, which is going to be important as we see as this unfolds. Now, here's our Libra card again. There's the balance card and reflection. It goes right back to last week. I mean, there's a lot here that we've been set up for. Now, it's interesting that it came out this way, because it's almost like reinforcing on multiple dimensions here the need for balance, because in itself it is in this horizontal position. So this is where we draw our power from. This is where we are rooted. This is where our connection to our subconscious, our intuition, the collective unconscious really is. And again, balance. About what is justice other than balance? What is reciprocity other than energetic balance? All of these things are energetic and they need to be balanced within us. And so it's always a choice. It's always a choice. And that's really important to realize, that we have to actually apply what we know about ourselves in order to transfigure in the scales. If we want the scales to be balanced, we actually have to act on something in a social context. And so again, this is coming out in terms of not so much the balance. We're not imbalanced, but we're not completely balanced yet. Like, it's almost like we're in the middle of the scale flipping to the other side, as we're going to see with the High Priestess, right? Again, we're going from the Emperor and then into it, like a seamless transition into the High Priestess, which is the very opposite of what the Emperor really represents, which is much more about the subconscious, intuitive, deep inner knowledge of self. But where we can draw our power from, I think, is allowing these scales to start to move a little bit within us, and to do it seamlessly, right? When you're the hub of the wheel, it's because the wheel is turning so quickly that it doesn't even look like that it's turning. And I think that is really the adeptness that we can really draw our power from right now. In terms of where we release it, right? As above, so below. Here's our reflection card. And this goes back to knowing the difference between our intuitive voice and our emotional compulsions, because one will be calm and assured and very supportive, and the other is going to be based on fear and on lack and on ego and envy and all the things that like keep us in that programming of fear. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't. It's, being aware of truth and being awake to what is not the same as running the fear script. And I think that has been almost intentionally misrepresented, so that people think that being aware of what is the same as running the fear script. And then that keeps you actually not as awake as you think you are. It's kind of a red herring, right? So reflection, trust your gut, trust your inner voice. Your receptivity to this area is really high. And when the moon comes into Cancer tomorrow, squaring the sun for a third quarter square, which in fact is a crisis of consciousness, this is going to be really important to pay attention to. And it's literally at the top of our awareness right now to have a strong reflection of what is, under the surface, or what often is hidden in our subconscious, because we are going to go into that place really strongly, especially when the moon comes into Cancer, and she's in her waning gibbous now, which means she's getting darker and darker and darker. So take the opportunity while you can, while there's still some light before we get to this third quarter moon, to really, we're in that stage still between the full moon and the third quarter moon. So there's still a lot of illumination. So take the opportunity to pay attention to this. What is your inner voice of a lower emotional compulsions that is pressing fear into your reality, and keeping you kind of locked in a place of hopelessness and a sense that, or total dissociation. That's another way that this can be manifested. So pay attention and put your attention here, because what we're seeing here is that the power of our feelings is really going to literally shape the landscape around us. It's all coming from the seat of our creation, which is our sacral chakra area, right? Under, at the seat of who we are. So we draw our power from this ability now to move into seamlessly, right? And this is where Mercury at Arcturus really going retrograde is giving us an opportunity to apply, to go back over this territory, and really look within ourselves, and using our mental capacity to look within ourselves about how we're going to apply the knowledge of ourself to this balance point. Because we, the high priestess, there is a lot of fear going into these spaces because it's dark, it's unknown. There's the subconscious, right? We don't necessarily want to look at ourselves in the mirror. We don't want to look at what's embedded in our subconscious, especially when it's been put there or programmed in by, generation after generation of all of these different types of technologies that'll do that. So we're with the moon this is the moon. The high priestess does represent the moon and vice versa. And so you see that there's a veil, but it's a mesh, right? It's not totally veiled, but it's not totally clear. You have to actually be able to see through the mesh in order to get the full picture here. But look, there's tons of fruit. There's a camel that has, storing the water within. It's all within us, right? And there's geometric patterns all around as well. There's, like I said, flowers and fruit, and there's abundance here, right? There's growth. There is a sense of nourishment, and there's a sense of fertility that goes along with this as well. But it's really about the fertility in our subconscious, because again, that's where everything grows from. By the time it's in your mind, it's already here. It's already energetically in a template, right? It's already this mesh structure, this grid structure. So we want to be working on that level of our energy, which is why it's so important to be able to understand and know what it feels like in your body to do a gut check. Because if it's all up here, it's already embedded, right? And so that's one way that we keep rehashing a lot of energetic imprints, thinking that if we just think about things enough that we will create them. And it's like, well, by the time you're thinking of them, by the time that you're naturally thinking of them, they're already there, which is why you have to live in the resonance of these things that you want, or this trajectory that you're on. You have to live in the resonance as if it's already there, and then your thoughts will naturally find that place of this is our, your thoughts will follow that natural unfoldment energetically. But this is going to take us into the subconscious, and it can get dark, and there can bring a lot of fear up. And so be aware of that, because this is where we're really going to this is really where we're going to find ourselves. It's not going to be outside of us. And it's important to realize this, because now the stakes just got higher. We reached that critical mass, and it's no accident that there was a literal shaking of the planet in the Mediterranean, where there is a very large underwater volcano. Now, that's not substantiated by any official source, but let's just take it for what it is. I'm sure we can find evidence of it somewhere, but it's not going to be sitting on the surface going like, hey, guess what? There's a huge underwater volcano in the Mediterranean that if it blows like La Palma, that's going to have a huge impact and cause a lot of chaos. So, but we can have an impact on the larger context energetically, but we have to get into this space. It's not going to come from our minds necessarily. Now, part of that, speaking of space, so we see the Three of Roses, the loving elementals, right? We have to, again, cultivate joy, to have fun, to cultivate an innocence, a connection to the literal planet, right? There's this little child sitting next to the stream, surrounded by nature, and then all of the little elementals that are there. It's because the child is innocent. Their mind hasn't been programmed and whitewashed to not see these aspects, and it's really about having a direct connection, like the lamb, right, to its renewal. It's young, it's innocent, it's playful, and it's loving, right? And it's coming from our emotions, right? The roses. And along with that, the panda, create a sacred space for yourself, right? This is about how your soul is your sacred space within yourself and a place where you cultivate inner peace and knowing. And it's going to come from within yourself. It's not going to come from outside of you. If you want to see the elementals coming to you, you have to cultivate all of these things inside of yourself first. And so this is telling us and reminding us and giving us the message here that we have to cultivate the sacred space within us as a part of our balancing act, okay? Because if we do that, then we can go into the subconscious realm and really get a sense of our deep knowing and the inner source of knowledge, rather than looking outside of us or looking for somebody outside of us to make a decision, make a change, act on our behalf. It's not going to happen that way. We have to act on our own behalf, and we're going to have to get into the sacred space of our own soul. Now, when it comes to the reflection, first let's look at the Six of Forces first, because again, this is about the waterfall. Our intuitive energy can literally shape the landscape around us through our resonance, right? Tapping to your feelings and create, which is where the unicorn comes in as well. Indulge your creative, imaginative, and magical side. Whatever your artistic expression is, it's going to actually have a direct impact on the force of your intuitive and feeling-based energy and your resonance. And so these two things are connected to each other. But part of it is being able to, if we are able to do this, it'll make it a lot easier to get that strong reflection of what's going on inside. And then we express it through something creative, right? Something creative, something imaginative. You make an art piece, right? You write, and that's music, that's visual art, that's graphic art, that's writing something, right? That is a song that you create. It is, a grid pattern that you create, something, but it's coming from the emotions, it's coming from the feelings, it's coming from the intuition. And you have to be able to know exactly what's in that space if you want to be conscious of what you are creating within yourself, that will then attract to you what it is that is resonant with that, okay? And if we do this on a mass scale, then we start making actual change, right? But it doesn't come from dissociating ourselves from the reality around us. So, that was a mouthful. So now we're going to look at the chart for today. And we're going to look at, I'm going to tell you a little story about Arcturus and the Boots constellation and how it relates to Crete. And what it means to be an adept, right? So, okay, guys, so let's see here. So we're going to go through the astrology first, and then I'm going to tell you a little story, and then we'll end with that. So first of all, let's go back to where we are. Here is our moon in Gemini, and we're finding here, first of all, that Mercury is already stationed retrograde, okay, at Arcturus, right, within a degree of Arcturus, the fixed star Arcturus, right? So big Arcturian starseed activation, that goes without saying, okay? And now Mercury is retrograde, so that's the review time. It's the opportunity to turn that ability to utilize the mind and our intelligence and the swiftness into ourselves and go over all of this information that Mercury has been going over since the new moon, since the literal day of the new moon in this September, in this month, where it was at 14 to 15 degrees of Virgo. Mercury's going to retrograde back to that point. So everything since then that Mercury has traversed, we're going to go back over with a fine-tooth comb. We're going to go back over with a more critical eye. We're going to review that and put it through our analysis system again and apply it within ourselves as opposed to necessarily applying it outside of ourselves. We've been applying it outside of ourselves, and now we're going to apply it within so that we can apply it again outside of ourselves when Mercury stations direct in October, on the very same day that Jupiter stations direct in Aquarius. So there's certainly going to be a lot of mental energy that is going to activate this coming month, because Saturn's going to station direct, Jupiter's going to station direct. When I say this month, I mean October, and Mercury is going to station direct. And of course, Pluto will station direct, but that's in an Earth sign. So Arcturus, Right. What is the Sabian symbol here talking about? Well, first of all, it's talking about how I'll tell you the Sabian symbol. An eagle and a dove change into each other, right? It's the interaction of the eagle, which is the spiritual will, and the love, which is the dove, when a critical need arises, right? It's the adeptness of being able to seamlessly move between these polarities as the need arises. This is about the reconstruction after the transfiguration. But it's about how consciousness operates beyond duality because it's working for a single purpose. But again, remember the full moon where everything was differentiated in that moment? It's coming from one conscious singular beam of light, and it goes through the prism, and then you see how it's differentiated into all its unique frequencies and wavelengths of visible light. It's all for the same purpose, but it then separates into a dualistic nature, which is the scales of balance of Libra, right? We have to apply this to a social context when we're talking about Libra. And when I say social, it can definitely mean social with people, but also social in an ecosystem, social in a solar system, in the galactic system, in the whole universe. And that's really what the Arcturians represent, is their ability, their adeptness in being able to master what it means to find balance in the physical material world through the one natural law. So this ability to move from will to, spiritual will and love, and when critical needs arise, this is where Mercury is going to stop and go backwards and be like, okay, so I've touched this point, and now I'm going to go back over all this old territory, and we're going to go back over it again. So if you have Mercury retrograde in your natal chart, you're already very adept in terms of the Mercury retrograde period, right? What that feels like. You're already much more calibrated in some ways to be able to turn the lens within the self. And so this is a very, I have Mercury retrograde. So, and many clients, obviously, a lot of people do, because Mercury goes retrograde like 3-4 times a year. It's not new. Just like, reviewing your notes for an exam is not new. It's something that you do, every time there's an exam coming. So, and it's very Arcturian. Again, it's the adeptness to be able to move within the from one side to the other seamlessly in order to find the balance. It's a dynamic process in all of nature, not just in a social context, but in all relationships. So Mercury stations retrograde. We have that. We find ourselves with our Gemini moon. The moon is, a couple hours ago, was in a square to Pallas Athena. Now, she is in a degree in Pisces, which is really showing us that our internal strategy, because she's retrograde, the goddess of wisdom and strategy in war, she's in a degree in Pisces right now where it's about a simulated assault. We're kind of in a practice round right now. And with Mercury stationing retrograde, that even adds more to it, that we're in a practice round. Live shells, but it's a practice round. It's a simulated assault for what's coming down the pipeline, especially because Pallas is retrograde. So we're all kind of going through, this is just the beginning, right? This is really just the beginning. October is a huge flashpoint, and we are going to, we would be well advised, to really identify our own internal strategy at the moment about, what it means to engage in this simulation for something that will, and very real, right? Live shells, but it's a practice round. And so the moon here is in a square. It's over here, right? This is Pallas Athena. So the moon is in a square to this position, because the moon, of course, in Gemini is, our feelings are kind of like, there's no solidity to them in terms of how we feel, right? It's kind of all over the place. Our feelings are kind of bouncing back and forth with the polarity. We are engaging with all manner of possibility. I do see that as well. It's kind of like everything's like bouncing around in some ways, or even like a ping-ponging effect. And this particular degree is really about the need for objectivity to confirm our subjective realization. So while we are really going over our strategy, our own internalized strategy that is just like bombarding us with live ammunition, the square here is that on some level, internally and emotionally, we really need to clarify our experience through actual contact with other people for actual communication. And so this with the moon can certainly happen on much more of a telepathic level, much more of an empathic level. Perhaps it's coming through the subconscious, through our dream state, but there is a need for objective confirmation that can be really hard to tap into when we're being bombarded with live ammunition through some sort of simulated assault. And it's an important part of our strategy, but our own emotional state, I think, is really grasping for something to clarify our experience. And so that square there is a real learning moment. How do we manage this space while at the same time realizing that our strategy needs to account for the fact that we still need to be kind of in this practice realm? And I think that's really difficult. The moon then comes to quincunx, or have that 150-degree angle with Venus in Scorpio. Wow, she's really doing, she's taking a lot of the slings and arrows right now for the Scorpionic realm, because she is at her detriment there. It's really uncomfortable to be there for Venus. But what she is doing is giving us the ability in terms of who we value, what we value, in our actual sensitivity to the world around us, the depth of feeling that goes along with communion and what that means, and the power of our symbols. And how when we collectively give power to these symbols, that it actually creates something. And it's not comfortable. And this is going to be a real eye-opener when things start moving into Scorpio, and we have our eclipse in Scorpio, and we start to move towards the South Node coming into Scorpio soon. It's going to be way more palpable. It's going to be way more, how do I say this? It's just going to be more obvious, more illuminated, more on the surface. And with Mars coming into Scorpio, that's going to be happening as well. Mars is co-ruler of Scorpio, so the drive to go into these areas and get to the truth is going to be profoundly strong. And so Venus may not be comfortable here, but she is doing incredible work for us if only we allow ourselves to really be sensitive to that area that we just want to avoid, right? Or we end up drowning in and utilizing intoxication and dissociation in order to avoid what it actually feels like. So this quincunx here, right, this opportunity to transmute this energy is very interesting, because while we are in this position here, in our feelings and in the subconscious of accessing every possibility, right, and taking it all in, she is in a position that's drawing the curtains away in a dark room and showing the middle path, right? Like drawing the polarity away and showing that there is something down the middle that we can look towards and walk down, which again is really difficult when we're feeling like the multitude of all of the possibilities right in front of us and in our subconscious. And in some ways that can be a real distraction, and in some ways it is a distraction, right? And so the quincunx here is such a beautiful opportunity to, you don't want to push away all of these possibilities, but you also don't want to get distracted from the focal point down the middle here, right? Pulling away the polarity, which is what Gemini represents, pulling it away and seeing the unknown path right in front of us. And so we can transmute this energy. And, this allows us to see all the possibilities, but not be so caught up in them that we can't actually start walking down the pathway forward. And so this quincunx will force us to adjust ourselves in that way, because of course it'll, the bombardment of possibility with a moon in Gemini into our subconscious is incredible. Then the moon's going to come around and square Neptune in Pisces. So this is a mutable square, Pisces and Gemini. And right here, this square, right? There's a lot of possibility for change and shifting, mutable square. It's a lot of malleability. So we may be wanting to kind of find a way for these two polarities to dance harmoniously with each other. And again, the square here is that we still have to contend with a very powerful, dissolution down to the very basic mandate down from the mountain, right? We may be still trying to make sense of, okay, so there's these like opposing dialectic here, right? This thesis and antithesis, and I want to make them harmonious within me, like dancing together, and find some organic wholeness within myself. But the square is really an opportunity, again, right? When we lean into how uncomfortable those squares are, the friction there, it does allow us to grow, because Neptune is like, I'm going to solve everything. There isn't even a polarity. There's just this one singular truth that's coming down from the mountain, and what are you going to do with it, right? And so again, the square in this position is going to challenge us and really cause a lot of friction with where the subconscious that's just desperate to try to like make sense of what's happening here in the face of very singular, very powerful dissolution that only leaves us the truth, right? And with its retrograde, Neptune retrograde, it's certainly the truth that is accessible within us. The fog within us is very clear if we choose to see it. If we choose not to see it, that is still a choice, okay? And then the moon comes along to trine Jupiter, which is the degree now. Jupiter's moving into its next degree, and this is about discipline. Oh boy. And this is the degree that Jupiter is going to station direct in October, 22 to 23 degrees Aquarius. This is about being able to discipline ourselves and to take the discipline and training that we've gotten in order to really, kind of take the wild power and the incredible energy of the entire collective that Aquarius stands for, and really be able to apply it to some sort of position of discipline, right? And using our intelligence to do so. Now, this moment here, the trine, this air trine with the moon at this position is showing the best way to do this is to cut back all the extraneous growth, right? Start pruning back all of the stuff that you don't need. And you can take that as a reference to literal like plant work, right? Where you prune back all of the extraneous growth. So only that growth that is ultimately going to be strong enough to bear the fruit eventually when it comes to Virgo, right? Is going to be supported, right? And so that the resources of the plant aren't distributed all over the place. You're cutting back the extraneous growth. You're pruning. You're controlling for what actually is going to be strong enough to hold and bear the fruit later down the road. And this is very much connected to Jupiter, which is expanding within us. The potential and representing and providing a space in some ways for us to really discipline ourselves with this is so important. This connection today is so important. Just this little air trine right here in this moment will make a big difference down the road, because if we continue to allow ourselves to be bombarded by the full range of ideas, and not be able to prune them back and get to an essential nature here, by the time we get to the moon in Cancer and that third quarter square of the sun and moon, we're not going to be able to see the hidden reality that we can't actually even see with our mind. We're going to have to feel it in our self, right? In our own intuition. But if we are giving all of our energy to all of this extraneous thought and ideas and the bombardment of information, then yeah. And Jupiter is going to support this. This moment here is going to be like, I'm going to give you all of the resources. I'm going to give you all of the advocacy. I'm 100% behind you in this discipline of everything that it means to be an awakened human, right? It's not enough to just be awake. You have to actually apply it to some sort of action. And that has become so clear over the weeks and months leading up to this. And now we're at the time where that actually needs to be the case. Is to do something, take some action that is inspired, right? Inspired from a place of joy and beauty and growth and not fear necessarily. That makes a big difference. But it's about disciplining ourselves, and cutting back what is unnecessary in our brain space and in our subconscious, right? A lot of shit has been put there that we don't even realize. So it's important that we are aware of that. Now, and the last piece here for the day is that the moon is in a quincunx to Pluto in Capricorn. And this, again, is really about, again, the trimming back, right? The ability to keep, cut back everything and to allow, while that's happening, and while in some ways our consciousness is going to be kind of like above everything in terms of the discipline that Jupiter is giving us all the resources in order to really be like, you've gotten to this point. Remember, we've been here before already. Go back to that discipline, everything that you've learned, all of the dots that you've connected, right? Each of us is a node in this geometric pattern, and once we connect them all together, it actually has its own full resonance now, but we have to actually be disciplined with that. We can't just let it be, we can't just waste it. And so there's a certain amount of our consciousness, our conscious awareness and our subconscious awareness that can, above all of that. So we're not like completely pulled into the fray. And then when it's time to prune, that's where I think it's going to be really, again, a transmutational opportunity, because Pluto is raw. Pluto is on the ground. Pluto is something that we feel within ourselves and is it literally destroys in order to transform. And so in the face of that, those things are not going to seem like they fit together, but they really are the opportunity to, square the circle, essentially. So I want to talk about Arcturus and the connections here between Arcturus and Crete and Greek mythology and where Mercury is, because I just think the connection is so interesting. So we talked, let's see here. I wonder if I can I'm going to bring up the Boots constellation real quick. And this is what's on the front here, but I'm going to show you this actual image just because this is important. This is really important. And I don't know, this is just an image that I found. So this is not endorsing whatever Facebook page this came from necessarily. This is just the image of it in a visual. Okay. So we already talked about Arcturus, Arcturian starseed. I've talked about this many times. And if you want to know your starseed origins, you can book a reading through catalystenergies.net. That's in the description box. And you can find out what planets, where in your natal chart the Arcturian nature is, if it's there. And that gives you a really good indication of what area of your life, and also when these things come around, how they activate that part of you so that you can utilize it with full consciousness and awareness. So Arcturus. Now this is the Boots constellation, or Booties, or however you pronounce it, right? It's the shepherd. It's the herder. Now, so look at this. You see that there is a staff, right? There is a staff here that is the shepherd's staff. So you have the sheep herding element. And you also have it's like a scythe, right? It's a tool that is for harvesting, but it also can be a weapon. So what is the Greek mythology of the Boots constellation or the herder? Well, in Greek mythology, it is Arcada, the being named Arcada. And who is Arcada? Well, he was the king of Arcadia, and guess where Arcadia was? Oh, it was in Crete. It was on Crete. Okay, so Arcada is the son of Zeus, and apparently Crete is actually where Zeus and Apollo and Artemis were all born, created, manifested, however you think about it. This is where they came from, was the Isle of Crete in Greece. And so Arcada was the progeny of Zeus and a nymph named Callisto. And without getting too much into the full mythology of it, so we know that Arcada was very powerful because he was this, the son of Zeus, which is Jupiter, which is the leader of the gods of the pantheon, right? And so the Arcada was the king of Arcadia, right? And very important figure within like ancient Greek history and mythology. So what we see here as this king was that he actually was not only a hunter, right? Because his mother was turned into a bear because of Hera or Juno and her streak of jealousy and envy whenever Jupiter stepped out on her. She would always do stuff like this. And so she turned his mother, Callisto, into a bear. And so Ursa Major is very connected to where the Boots constellation is. And it's said that Arcada or Boots is the guardian of the bear, right? He's in the sky being the guardian of his mother. So he's got this hunter part of himself because of his mother, but he also has the shepherd part, and he as a leader really taught his people how to cultivate and agriculture and weaving and things like that. And so there is this adeptness just within this figure of Boots or Arcada in Greek mythology that does have the love principle and the spiritual will, right? The hunter and the herder, right? The person that is able to stand in a leadership position, the divine masculine, but also able to hold space and show how to cultivate, how to gather nourishment, how to weave things together. That is very much the feminine. Now, look where Arcturus is. Look where the star Arcturus is. It's right in his groin, right? The seat of anybody's creative power from a biological perspective is right where Arcturus is. Now, isn't that interesting that the star that represents like the pinnacle of this adeptness is at the seat of the procreative power of this individual, right? Of the place where masculine and feminine polarity literally will come together in relationship in order to create, in sexual alchemy, in procreation, okay? Arcturus is right here. Now, that does suggest that we are looking at our own procreative alchemical power in this balancing of polarity within us, right? And so we're talking about Libra, we're talking about the scales of Libra, we're talking about the balance of that polarity and the application of who we are in the balance of that polarity, okay? And it is, again, where this huge earthquake happened today was on Crete. And this figure is completely Boots or Arcada is, in fact, was the king of Arcada, and Arcadia was on the Isle of Crete. And Mercury now is retrograde, right? The trickster in some ways, going back over this territory at this point, going back over. So again, I'm not going to connect the dots for you. I'm just giving you data points of information. I just think it's very interesting that Arcturus is literally in his groin. I think it's interesting that this character has the ability to balance the divine masculine leadership quality, but also to the ability to herd, to gather in, right? To cultivate, to weave together. A much of also attract, magnetic. Also, that is the divine feminine. That Arcturus that represents the mastery of this aspect right there in the groin of this constellation. And then to have Mercury retrograde here on the day that there is a massive earthquake on Crete. I don't know, just connecting some dots for you. You can, just like this constellation, right? They're connecting these dots into a form, into a figure, into a narrative, into a story. So I'm going to leave you with that. That's plenty of information to work with for today. So my friends, thank you. In Cyprus, what is in Cyprus? Yeah, I think there was another earthquake in Cyprus, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. I'm going to have to go back and look at the earthquake tracker and see. But there was 2 actual earthquakes on Crete today, and I just showed you that as well, in different parts of the island. So Cyprus, for sure, that might have been the case as well. So I'm going to leave you with that today. Thank you so much for being here. I truly appreciate each and every one of you. I appreciate your patience with if you're waiting for a reading from me, or we're in the middle of a package and which comes with multiple readings and interactions. I really appreciate it. This week has been intense, and it really didn't dawn on me until yesterday how intense this week has been for me. Like just going through death of a family member, getting sick, my dad going into emergency surgery again. For something that the almighty priests of the medical establishment, had they listened to him when he was telling them that something was wrong in his body, and they didn't tell him that was just all in his head, he wouldn't be here right now in that situation, because they would have actually caught the thing that then cascaded to the event that needed him to go back into surgery. So there's a lot here, and I accept and value where we all are right now, and we're all doing the best that we can. And so I'm going to be doing the astrology for the season from equinox to solstice. We're going to go over that. I'm going to take a break, and then I'm going to record that, and we'll be here tomorrow live for the transmission for Tuesday the 28th for our third quarter moon, and what that represents as well. So Uranus is going to sextile Pallas Athena. So we just talked about Pallas Athena and the strategy, the internalized strategy of our live ammunition with our our simulation assault, and have Uranus involved in that situation. Just be prepared. And also too, with the third quarter moon and squaring the sun and all of the things that go along with that, right? The propensity to want to protect from the antagonism of the forces of darkness, right? In square to our own subconscious knowing that there are things going on in the background that are not normally seen. There's going to be plenty of opportunities within today and tomorrow to really allow ourselves to really tap into what this means. So I'd love to hear your feedback. Of course, if you're interested in a reading or energetic work to support you can book through catalystenergies.net. I'm still offering the flash sale up until the 6th of October. So you get the lunar transit reading. So you look at how this whole next lunar cycle is going to affect you in your natal chart, and also 30 minutes of Reiki to really just kind of get into the energetic aspect as well. That's $77. You can book through the website or reach out and just email me. That's in the description box below. Thanks, guys. I love you. I'll see you tomorrow.